What's up everyone, and welcome to my Chris guide. You can check out an individual chapter by clicking on any one of the icons, or just let the menu play out to watch the entire thing. Hopefully you'll enjoy it and possibly learn a thing or two about one of my favorite characters in Marvel. A big part of understanding Chris as a character is knowing his moves and what they're capable of. You can do the same three tactics like full screen magnums, jumping gunshots, and dash in footsies, but it'll only get you so far. So I'm going to go through all of Chris's normals, specials, and hypers to fill you in on what, if anything, they're capable of.
Standing light.
Pretty much worthless. Normally a high hitbox wouldn't be bad for most jabs, but it loses a lot of its effectiveness because it's non-spammable, so you can really get by without ever using it. Although I have seen Senor Taxi use it as an anti-air against Hulk, so I guess don't completely overlook it.
Crouching light.
Again, non-spammable, and because of crouching medium, it makes almost zero sense using this to footsie with. But it does have one significant use. It's quick enough and low enough that it can catch characters off raw landmines. It doesn't seem to work against everyone. I guess some characters either fall faster than others or aren't propelled as high and reach the ground quicker. I don't know, it's weird.
Air light.
I've actually never seen a more useless move. It makes Chris look so awkward, you'd swear he was laying down in midair sleeping or something, or even posing for a painting, Titanic style. And because his elbow is so close to his body, you'd think Marvel hitboxes, bro, but they had to make only his elbow the actual hitbox, so you can't even do anything cross-up wise.
Standing medium.
Man,
Air medium.
not a bad little aerial attack. You can use it to jump in air string as anti-air against characters like Nova, and of course for your super jump magic series, but not much else.
Crouching medium.
Pretty godlike. Notice how it has the same startup and recovery as standing medium, but the damage of standing heavy. That's pretty awesome. Great range too. And look how high the hitbox reaches. You know a crouching low is godlike when it doubles as an anti-air.
Forward medium.
Also pretty godlike. A 90 damage long range OTG and 3/4 screen poke that special cancels into guns, mines, grenades, combination punches, prones, supers, and team supers. It's basically the definitive Chris attack. An amazing projectile that can be used effectively in both combos and the neutral game.
Standing heavy.
It has a surprising amount of range and has a tendency to screw up combos if not used right. A tipper will cause launcher to whiff unless you stun baton in between, but often heavy won't leak to stun baton in some of the longer combos. Aside from that, it's an incredibly solid attack, and at -2 on block, it's pretty safe as well. On a side note, I like to punish super jumps by dashing under and auto-correcting with it, but it also has some pretty strange cross-up hitboxes. Just look at this mix-up.
Air heavy.
I'd probably avoid using this unless you plan on doing regular jump air strings on opponents to get them grounded, but I absolutely hate the way it knockbacks opponents, and it never feels like it has enough hit stun. You'd think it being a knife animation it'd be as great as that other dagger attack, but nope.
Forward heavy.
You'll probably be using forward heavy mostly for combos, but it's also important for long range ground bounce catching. Properly timing a quick dash with a forward heavy will be important if you plan on confirming those near corner magnums into full-fledged kill combos. On a more general note, Chris's forward heavy has a ridiculous hitbox. It has some insane reach, not just in front but behind him as well, which again makes for some pretty ambiguous cross-under mix-ups, even more so than with his standing heavy. Watch out for that recovery though. At -6 on block, it's surprisingly punishable, so always be sure to cancel into something safe.
Launcher.
It's the typical uppercut launcher that a lot of characters have, and you can do many of the same cross-under mix-ups that you would normally see Akuma players do. It has decent anti-air capabilities, and it'll probably be one of the better options for attacking things like Vajra, but at -9 on block, it's way too unsafe to be throwing it around.
Air special.
This attack would probably be amazing if Chris had an air dash. It does a decent job at protecting underneath Chris, but because of his lack of air mobility, you really can't use it for any tricky mix-ups. So it'll mostly be used for combos.
Crouching heavy.
While being a pretty underwhelming attack, Crouching Heavy does have some majorly important uses. It's a projectile, but has much shorter range than forward medium. It's a low, but isn't quite as speedy or reliable as crouching medium. For those reasons, it'll almost always be used exclusively as an OTG, albeit a really good one. It'll be your go-to attack when you need to pick up characters off hard knockdowns.
Air down heavy.
You'd think my lack of love for crouching heavy would transition over to this attack, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I love air down heavy, and everything it allows Chris to do from a pressure standpoint. And every one of the major Chris players takes advantage of it in one way or another. For one, it's mobile and can cover a multitude of angles depending on your jumps. Super jump up, back, and forward all cover different angles than regular jump up, back, and forward, which opponents have to respect or risk getting tagged. In a lot of ways, it's a lot like Ghost Rider's Air S, and Chris can also confirm off his given the proper team composition. The main difference with Chris being his is a single hit 90,000 damage bullet, so often his confirms result in much higher damage. Air down heavy is also special cancelable, and you can often catch players off guard if you super jump and magnum off of it, especially if used sparingly and unpredictably. There is a catch to this attack, being you're unable to block after doing one until you touch the ground. That is, unless you special cancel, so there's no reason you shouldn't be.
Flamethrower.
So awesome. Aside from its completely broken uses and combos where it does insane damage and gives insane meter, it's actually surprisingly effective in the neutral game as well, and I've actually taken out as many as 3 Soul Fists with a single flamethrower, and then special cancel to a flame grenade to nullify a 4th. That's a lot of damage and pressure mitigation for not a lot of effort. Flamethrower will also completely outrange things like Helmbreaker, Pipe, and even Hulk's Air S, so it's pretty effective anti-air as long as you space it correctly. And because it's a whopping 25 hits, it'll cut through armor like butter, which will put a real quick stop to Gamma Charge spam. Flamethrower is considered a projectile, so it can't be nullified by things like Akuma's Tatsu, Captain America's Charging Star, Vital's EX Thunder Knuckle, or Virgil's sword attacks, but I'm not exactly sure how much durability it has because it's not listed in the guide, and my tests have had really weird results. And on one hand, it'll stop 3 Soul Fists at 5 durability each, but a 3 durability Samurai Edge shot will blow right through it, sometimes. One more piece of information. The Brady guide lists Flamethrower as -1 on block, but either this is an error or they failed to clarify something. Obviously at -1, Flamethrower will be perfectly safe, but I've actually found instances where it can be punished. If you allow Flamethrower to finish to completion, opponents are able to get in a crouching light at point blank range. And since Wesker is able to get in his low short, Flamethrower would have to be at least -5 on block. You can, however, make it safe by cutting it off early or letting go of the button before the 25th hit. I do this here, and the same attacks that were punishing Chris before are no longer able to. Moral of the story, don't let Flamethrower finish on its own. Either cut it early or special cancel into something to make it truly safe. Unless, of course, your Flamethrower is part of a combo. By all means, make sure every single flame hits.
Combination punches.
A lot of creative players will use all 3 variants of Chris's combination punches, but aside from combos, the light and medium versions aren't all that useful. There are some frame trap tick setups you can use with the light and medium versions that can catch people off guard, but for a lot of Chris's bread and butters and ambiguous cross-under setups, you want to stick with the heavy boulder punch. It's by far the best one. Many players like LLND and GC Yoshi will often use the first hit of combination punch to get in a little bit of extra damage before going into sweep, but players like myself and Senior Taxi who don't do this would probably consider it an unnecessary risk. There are some instances where it is necessary, like if Chris pushes opponents too far away with Flamethrower. Sometimes the only way to land sweep will be to single hit combination punch first. The most important thing to note, however, light combination punch, very safe on block at -2. Medium combination punch, not as safe but still pretty hard to punch at -3 on block. Heavy combination punch,
Silent alarm activated!
-20. Hulk's ground heavy has a startup of 15 frames, so I'd imagine every normal in the game could probably punish this attack on block. Don't let your opponent block this.
Shop done.
While seldomly seen, shotgun has some surprisingly effective uses. Because of its widespread, it's pretty good against box jumpers and can even interrupt projectile absorbing attacks such as Mustatsu and Tron's air and ground heavy. Funny enough, Chris's shotgun is his only special gun move that can combo in and out of itself to a second shotgun, then to a grenade super from almost full screen. It'll scale pretty hard, but he can do it. Shotgun is also better than either machine gun or magnum at the end of combos as a last ditch effort to finish off characters without a hyper. One more thing, the ground version has a whopping 31 frames on recovery, but still manages to be +6 on block. Frame traps anyone? While the air version is an ungodly +35 frames on block.
Machine gun.
Of Chris's vast arsenal, machine gun will probably be the best option for Chip. The air version is decent for lockdown, but only in certain matchups, and Chris can get blown up pretty easily if the opponent gets underneath the bullet line, so you'll want to be careful how you use it. As an assist, machine gun ranks pretty high. For some comparison, it'll beat nearly all fireballs and disruptor, trade with Hawkeye's triple arrow, but it'll lose to Doom plasma beam and Iron Man unibeam. Something Chris has on most characters though is that as an assist, machine gun can't be ducked under by anybody, not even Amy.
Magnum.
When it comes to Magnum, one thing always sticks in the back of my mind, and that's with great power
comes great responsibility.
Which should be the universal motto of Magnum. It is an amazing projectile, but it is also amazingly punishable. It's 22 frames on startup and 34 frames on recovery, which is almost an entire second where Chris is unable to block. If your opponent teleports during Magnum, you're free. If an opponent air dashes towards you during Magnum, you're free. If an opponent triangle jumps over Magnum, you're free. If your opponent wildly dashes towards you and does the luckiest split-second duck underneath Magnum, you better believe you're going to be free. That being said, Magnum is probably the best projectile in the game. It's specifically built to accomplish all of these things, but a few of these will be worth working on more. Like, say for instance, full screen confirms. I always see players botch the OTG off full screen Magnums. Even the best Chris players will tend to do this. I think some people forget that Magnum is a hard knockdown and a wall bounce, so you have a lot more time than you probably think to pick them up. But you need to do a full dash before the forward medium gunshot, which a lot of players tend not to do for some reason. And since we're talking full screen confirms, every ground Magnum landed should at the very least lead to 400k meterless, which can be easily attained by just Magnum, OTG, Magnum, OTG, Magnum. You might have trouble with the later two Magnum links, but it'll be worth practicing because Hawkeye players wish they had Chris's full screen meterless damage. Another thing that's probably worth noting is you shouldn't be afraid to throw one out against opposing projectiles. Magnum is built to either beat or trade with almost every other projectile in the game. And by the way, Chris can still confirm off trades with Magnum. And last but definitely not least, you should know how and when to use Magnum. The ground Magnum will do a good job at covering this area, while the air Magnum covers this one. And as you can see, the point where the two paths converge will be the worst place for opponents to be. You're basically free to Magnum to your heart's desire if your opponent stays in that area, but it'll become increasingly more risky doing this the closer they get to Chris. The main thing you want to take from this, Magnum in the green and avoid everywhere else. And obviously, this doesn't apply to teleporters.
Grenade.
You'll be using medium grenades mostly in combos, but they do have some pretty interesting uses in corner pressure. They run on a slightly shorter timer than the incendiary grenades, so it could surprise some players not familiar with the matchup. The explosion is a soft knockdown, which is tricky to confirm off of at mid-screen, but much easier to do in the corner. Aside from corner setups though, I don't know of many other uses for them, so you'll probably be sticking with Chris's other options when it comes to zoning.
Incendiary grenade.
Where should I start with these? It's one projectile with 6 sets of durability. That's right, 6. The initial explosion as well as 5 individual hitboxes from a flame carpet. The Brady Guide lists the explosion as a medium durability 1, which is actually more than Magnum, and it really can nullify a Magnum shot. While the individual flame carpet hitboxes have a single point of low durability each, so 5 low, 1 medium altogether. That's a crap ton of durability for a single move, and it's actually enough to completely break something like EX Thunder Knuckle, which has a lot of projectile durability itself, enough to compete with a lot of beams and projectiles, just not Flame Grenade. Aside from its sheer durability, opponents have to worry about 2 sets of hit stun as well, the first being a soft knockdown which leads up to 5 more mini hits. The mini hits are iffy though, and sometimes the initial explosion will propel opponents to the edge of the flame carpet, whereas sometimes only one or two of the tiny campfire hitboxes will connect, so you'll want to be careful with the attacks you throw out when trying to confirm off campfires. The grenades themselves can be manually detonated using normal gunshots, automatically detonated on a 2-second timer, or prematurely detonated if the opponent lands a hit on Chris. This generally causes a trade where Chris almost always has the advantage. In most cases, only attacks with Hump will normally beat it out. It takes less than a second to throw, but each grenade can linger for up to 4 seconds, and there's no limit to how many you can have on screen. You can probably cover the entire ground in fire if you wanted to. People will hate you for doing it in a match, but you can do it.
Landmine.
The mine won't trade nearly as well as Incendiary Grenade. It's actually a lot less reliable. It has a lot of durability itself, but only has 1 hitbox and 1 set of durability, not 6. The landmine also doesn't bounce around like the grenade, so its ability to trade is limited to 1 stationary chunk of the screen. For the most part, it'll be the thing you want to throw out before pressure happens, not while it's happening, because if you have one on screen, opponents will have almost no choice but to give you breathing room. You can then set up your normal full screen pressure if they back off, or lay more traps if they attempt to bypass. Something important to note is mine has a giant hitbox and will often hit opponents in the weirdest positions. Make sure you're always ready to confirm off those wild hits, because they will come. Just like with his grenades, Chris can also manually detonate mines by shooting them or by aiming crouching attacks at them as well. This is usually only used during Chris's more advanced combos, but it works well in the neutral too. Sometimes opponents like to get cute and go for grabs to avoid setting off a nearby mine, but they'll have to respect Chris's space if you show you have control over the explosion timings.
Prone.
It's weird how little prone is used, because the position it puts Chris in gives him huge advantages in a lot of matchups. For one, most characters' ground projectiles will become useless against Chris. Arrows, fireballs, beams, and even Tatsu will pass harmlessly over him. And at 10 frames of startup, it's even possible to prone during the freeze to avoid many beam supers, as long as you're near full screen. Even more, some people might not know that you can actually cancel into prone. As long as it's on block or on hit, you can prone off many of Chris's normals, making them either impossible or risky to punish. For example, something Dante or Virgil players will do a lot is push block and stinger punish the recovery of certain moves. And against Chris, they'll generally be looking to do this against Flamethrower. But on reaction, you can actually prone during the push block and use prone shot to interrupt the startup of stinger. You might even land a few shots before your opponent even realizes what happened. And this leads me to the best aspect of prone, the prone shot. You simply cannot underestimate how important it is for Chris to be able to apply pressure while being in a position to avoid pressure as well. A good example of this is against Hawkeye. With Chris in the prone position, oftentimes Hawkeye players will gimlet in response. Well, that's because it really is their only option. The only other move that can hit Chris in the prone positions are his trick shots, which are too slow on startup to get in on a Chris player's spamming prone shot. Hawkeye is basically forced to either gimlet, which Chris can simply up back and block as long as you start before the flash, or jump in, which involves all kinds of other risks.
Because the flame grenades pop at the end.
Mobility.
Alright, so I'm going to show you how I move around the screen with Chris, and the way I do it is I plink. Now, one single normal dash will be good enough for most things with Chris, but if you want to get across the screen really quickly and consistently, I would suggest to plink. I wouldn't suggest wave dashing. The thing with wave dashing is the faster you do it, the more likely you are of doing accidental prones, which is accidentally double tapping on down. I've seen players do it, and it's sad to see it sometimes.
And Chuck his character actually fell down. That was fucking retarded.
You really don't want to prone when you're trying to move across the screen. That's probably the worst thing that you can possibly do. So yeah, if you want to move across the screen quickly, I would suggest plinking. Now there's two ways to do this. There's the reliable way and then there's the safe way, and they both have to do with how you map your buttons. If you map light, medium, and heavy to your right trigger button, it seems to feel a lot more consistent when you plink. Like it's like you can do more plink dashes in a row without messing up. The thing with this way is when you do mess up, it's a lot more punishable. Because when you mess up when doing backwards plink dashes, you'll do flamethrower, and when you mess up doing forwards plink dashes, you'll do heavies, which are both extremely punishable. The safe way doesn't have that problem because you're taking heavy out of the equation, so only light and medium are mapped to your right trigger button. The drawback is that it seems to feel a lot less consistent. Like, I mess up a lot more when I'm trying to do a bunch of Plink dashes in a row. For some reason, it has something to do with the timing when heavy is involved. It just feels that way to me. Personally, I like light, medium, and heavy. I like the consistent way, but it's not going to be the right way for everybody. Now, regardless of which way you choose, the process is going to be exactly the same. What you do is you press the right trigger and your light button, and you press them both at the exact same time. And what happens is it takes about a split second longer for your trigger button to register than it does for your button. So it kind of mimics the rolling motion that you do on stick, and it works really, really well for stuff like plinking. Really, really consistent, and I really like doing it this way. And if you ever watch LLND, he's probably the master of movement with Chris, and I'm pretty sure he uses plinking as well. So yeah, that's pretty much my entire process of how to plink on pad.
Grenade launcher.
Grenade launcher is an extremely intricate hyper, and knowing everything about it can make a tremendous difference. For instance, did you know that the first grenade will neutralize a stalking player and even freeze Dormammu if he's in range of the explosion? Did you know under normal circumstances, the fourth grenade hits third and the second grenade hits last, ending with a soft knockdown? Did you know you can alter the order in which grenades land so that the fourth grenade hits last, leaving the opponent in a hard knockdown state? Did you know you can continue a combo off that hard knockdown state? Did you know each grenade has separate but equal durability, so it's technically possible to neutralize 4 separate hypers with 1 bar with Chris? It'll mostly be used in combos, but Chris's grenade launcher does have some pretty amazing properties that make it useful outside of combos as well. For one, it almost never loses to other hypers during a clash. Typically only supers with invincibility will beat it out. Most times, the first grenade will outright break the opposing hyper, leaving his opponent stuck in a hyper animation, while Chris simply goes on to shoot the rest of his grenades. Other times, like against Dormammu for instance, the two hypers will trade, but because of the first grenade, Dormammu still gets frozen, while Chris is free to open up Dorm however he pleases. Even hypers that are normally considered quote-unquote projectile invulnerable still lose to Chris because they don't always have an answer for the freezing status effect of the first grenade. Point is, you'll want to know how to take advantage of it wherever you can, because when it comes to Chris, not all of his tools are limited to just one aspect of the game, and it's no different when it comes to this hyper.
Sweep.
Seriously, do not use sweep outside of combos. Grenade launcher has its uses outside of combos pretty much because of one fact: it's actually pretty hard to punish if used correctly. Sweep on the other hand is hella easy to punish. There are a few interesting things you want to be aware of when it comes to sweep. If you're doing things right combo-wise, the shotgun will always whiff. Sweep is not a great hyper for birthdays. The OTG machine gun portion of the hyper is only able to pick up one character, and it won't always grab the right one. The magnum portion of the hyper will leave opponents in a sort of anti-gravity state, so it's oftentimes worth using early to make it easier to land certain things. For instance, I like to meter steal with Morgan off of it. And finally, the rocket launcher blast is a soft knockdown.
Satellite laser.
Satellite laser is probably one of the more difficult things to control, but I have come up with a pretty solid way of using it. Whether you're using it in a combo or on reaction to punish an opponent, the absolute first thing you want to decide is where you want to aim it. Depending on where you want the crosshair to appear, you want to do one of 4 things during the freeze frame. Holding down no buttons will cause the crosshair to appear directly over Chris. Holding down the light button will cause the crosshair to appear about a quarter screen's distance in front of Chris. Holding down the medium button will cause the crosshair to appear about a half screen's distance in front of Chris. And holding down the heavy button will cause the crosshair to appear about a 3/4 screen's distance in front of Chris. Be aware that the crosshair will always appear at its given distance in relation to Chris, even if the resulting distance is off screen. Also, you cannot spam the button. You must be holding it down as the crosshair appears in order to manipulate the distance. Spamming a button before the crosshair appears will probably result in it not appearing where you want it. So to consistently get the crosshair to appear where I want, I'll generally tilt my controller sideways during the freeze frame, and this just makes it easier to hold down one button while spamming down another. If I need the light or medium button held, I'll use my left thumb, whereas if I need to hold down heavy, I'll use my right thumb. And once I'm holding down the button to get the distance I want, I'll wait until the satellite laser crosshair appears, And once it does, I use my off thumb to start spamming down either of the 2 remaining attack buttons, and it should result in the first laser being called exactly where you want it. You can then return the controller to its normal position in between laser calls, and even reposition the crosshair if need be, and continue spamming light, medium, or heavy to get the remaining 2 lasers down in time. There is a bit of timing to this part, because if you spam early, it could change where the crosshair appears, but if you spam late, the laser might not be called in time, which will drop the opponent out of the combo, so you will want to practice.
Opening strategy.
From the start of every match, you should be trying to extend neutral for as long as possible, which means finding a way out of the opening mix-up and getting enough separation to make your magnums and grenades safe. Why magnums and grenades? Because they'll be your best tools for forcing opponents to come to you, then punishing them when they do. Not many things will be able to compete with Magnum at full screen, and in a lot of cases, calling an assist only makes things worse, which often forces opponents in. That's when you'll want to start tossing out grenades and laying out mines. Landmine will be your best bet against opponents that have to get really close to Chris to open him up, but it only works if you have one out before pressure happens, not while it's happening.
No. He tried to lay a mine there and he paid for it. You heard him say suck it.
In fact, you actually want to be blocking when one is out, and let the mine open up opponents for you. With grenades, namely the incendiary grenade, you have a lot more freedom to throw one out in the face of your opponent, and you can trust that it'll stun long enough to either allow for an opening touch or force the match back into neutral. Honestly though, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by simply having an incendiary grenade out on the field. And I wasn't surprised to see how often the best Chris players flat out end characters as a direct result of a random incendiary grenade. It happens a lot. The grenades don't necessarily have to be random though. A lot of times, Chris players will throw one out, then work their way towards it, sort of turning the campfire into a force field. For the Chris neutral machine to work, you have to play a step ahead of your opponent and be ready with the right tool to accomplish the right job. If the opponent is at full screen, Magnum. If they come in, mines and grenades. If they get hit, catch and kill. If they run away, Magnum again. If they sit and block, grab. If they separate you from your grenades, push block them into them. And on and on and on and on. Chris has a way to punish players no matter where they are on screen, and you basically want to have a set of moves ready to go into based on where your opponent is or can be. It's the classic zoning strategy, using the tools you have to force opponents to where you want.
Handling rushdown.
This is probably the question I get the most. If your main instinct is to grenade first, you sometimes might have trouble dealing with characters that tend not to give you the time or space needed to toss a grenade or lay a mine. Wolverine, for instance, can seemingly dive kick forever and either get a cross up if Chris does nothing, stack or counter hit if you mistime a push block, or option select grabs if you try to leave the ground. Throw in an annoying assist, and it can get tough getting any type of separation. If Wolverine is constantly in your face, he's generally doing dash-in moves. Dash-in jab, dash-in berserker slash, dash-in instant dive kick, dash-in overhead, and on and on. But in order to stop the pressure before it even has a chance to start, Chris needs mines and grenades out on the field of play. So to ensure you're able to get them out, you want to gunshot cancel to them. Why does this make any difference whatsoever? Well, because maths. Forward medium gunshot has 22 frames of recovery and landmine has 17 frames of startup, but since you're canceling into landmine, those 22 frames of recovery go out the window. And since forward medium has 19 frames of block stun, as long as the gunshot either hits or is blocked, the landmine that follows is completely unpunishable. And with a landmine out, Wolverine has to play Chris completely differently to ensure he doesn't go face first into an explosive. In the case of an aggressive Virgil, a lot of his teleport mix-ups are actually set up at the 3/4 screen distance and rely on assists for coverage. The major problem with that is that at any range, Chris can put a stop to ground-based special moves, including teleports, and assists before they even have a chance to become a factor, all at no risk to him because of prone shot. Prone shot is the bane of characters like Virgil, because if Chris is spamming prone, Virgil's entire mobility game is shot to hell, and he's basically reduced to two options, jump in and super jump in, both of which are laughably easy to punish. In the case of most characters, the main goal for Chris is to keep opponents out, but I think there's actually one exception to that rule, and that's Magneto. It's weird to say, but I actually like it when he tries to get in. One thing's for sure, I don't like it when he interrupts Magnum with Disruptor. But have you ever seen him instant overhead a mine? Or get meteor smashed by a magnum? Or left-right mix up a mine? Or footsie trade with a flame grenade? Or air H trade with a flame grenade? Magnetic blast trade with a flame grenade? Or throw trade with a flame grenade? Magnetic shockwave trade with a flame grenade? You bet I want him coming to me.
Anti-air.
The first thing you should know about Chris is that his guns are not anti-air. While Chris has many tools that make him very good against zoners, he does have a particularly hard time against a certain type. Characters like Doom, Trish, and Morgan who can stay in the air for extended periods of time while raining projectiles down are tough to deal with. It's not so much the projectiles themselves that make things difficult, it's the risks Chris has to take when he's forced to try to get in. Most players' first instinct when going against this,
He's probably going to get chipped out a lot by those grenades, but very smart of him to maneuver up out of them.
or this,
Yeah, always got to be careful.
is probably the super jump machine gun or magnum, but more often than not, it usually just leads to Chris getting punished. You can try grabbing, but even doing that has its risks, and some characters like Doom and MODOK can reach heights that Chris can't even jump to. Airstring to magnum is a decent way to get some opponents grounded, but there's a lot of guesswork with it, because you can't always do the same string. For example, an opponent at this height can be medium heavy magnumed, but that same string against an opponent who's even slightly higher will usually float too high, causing magnum to whiff. Usually Chris's best option is to just stay on the ground and weather the storm. It's not a sexy option, but it plays to his strengths, which are all ground based. A good assist will help, but even some of the best anti-assists only manage to delay the inevitable, while others, such as the typical Shoryuken assist, won't always reach, so they'll have varying levels of usability. Assists like Jam Session, Hidden Missiles, Daggers of the Knock, Mystic Ray, and Purification can all reach at any height, but are really only good for interrupting or projectile clashing, not confirming. Your best bet will be from the likes of Hawkeye, Taskmaster, or Strider, whose assists not only reach massive heights, but also do a good job at knocking opponents towards the ground where they can be comboed.
In terms of anti-air, Senior Taxi does a lot of really good things. Yes, he has Jam Session, but he seems to use it less as an option for anti-air, and more as a means of punishing characters who hover around midfield in general, regardless if they're on the ground or in the air. It's mostly just to push away, not necessarily to confirm from. His true air punishes work through mines, grenades, and movement, so they're things that the everyday Chris player can take advantage of, regardless of the type of assists you have. For instance, you can't see it, but if you listen close, he's constantly laying mines or throwing grenades when the camera shifts to super jumping opponents.
If you guys did not hear us before, he actually started. Though, Cloud needs to win this game to reset the bracket.
Mines will go in the landing zones, which will change depending on the character. For instance, you'll place mines a little differently against a Doom Foot Dive than you would against a Helmbreaker. Something I often see that works well is he'll throw a flame grenade, lay a mine, then start moving towards the grenade, and if timed right, the opponent will hit the ground, and no matter where they land, they'll have to deal with something, whether it be the mine, a campfire, or any type of grab or footsie pressure from Chris. The trick is to just have stuff waiting on the ground, so opponents have to take giant risks if they want to get in on Chris. If we take a look at LLND, his anti-air game usually doesn't get going until after he gets Gold Armor Shenko. The beauty of his setup though is that not every opponent immediately goes into airborne lane game, so he often doesn't need to go gold right away, if at all. But as soon as he sees it, he's usually ready to armor up by DHCing to Shenko, then throwing out a gong to cover Chris for a raw tag, so that they'll be forced to fall into campfires or armored pendulum protection, and he's usually able to confirm off either. There are other ways of dealing with airborne enemies if you're clever enough. If you take a look at my team, while I don't have an anti-air assist per se, I do have an extremely effective anti-air setup with my team that combats certain types of lane game very well. If we use Trish as an example, it takes a lot of time to super jump up in the air, throw out some traps, go into flight mode, throw out some volts, and then fall to the ground. During that time, I've called Morgan a good 2 to 4 times and have gotten quite a bit of meter from Harmonizer, and the chip damage that she's done in return is pretty negligible. Now, she can continue with her lane style, but most opponents will realize fairly quickly that strategy is only making things worse, and as soon as I get to 3 bars, I can team super to safely swat that annoying little fly out of the air. This forces Trish to come to me and play by my rules, and I usually always have mines and grenades waiting for when she eventually does try to dive kick in. Harmonizer is not a traditional anti-air assist, but by punishing the time it takes to set up a lane game, it works almost better than one.
Handling zoners.
Because I've already covered anti-air, for this section zoners and zoning will refer to lane game typically done while grounded. So characters such as Hawkeye, Arthur, Deadpool, Taskmaster, and everyone else in the game with a spammable ground projectile. Yeah, these guys get raped, all of them, and it really is that simple. For one, full screen opponents have to deal with Magnum, and not many things will beat it head to head. If we use Piercing Bolt as an example, surprisingly, it'll actually trade with Magnum, but because of its hard knockdown and wall bounce capabilities, Chris is still able to pick up Hawkeye even when he gets tagged. For the characters lucky enough to have either something with enough speed or durability to challenge standing Magnum, they still have to deal with the air version, but because it's so fast, the super jump air down heavy special cancels the Magnum will destroy opponents that get too spam heavy. And simply being able to cover those angles is just not enough when you have to worry about Magnum durability. But let's assume there could be a character able to deal with everything mentioned so far, they still probably couldn't deal with Prone Shot. Prone Shot is the ultimate anti-projectile. Simply put, most opponents don't have an answer for it. If they're lucky enough to even get something off, it'll still probably pass harmlessly over Chris's head. It basically makes the entire ground impossible to operate from, and not every character has airborne zoning capabilities. More often than not, it'll force opponents to awkwardly jump in, which will make them susceptible to air grabs, cross hunters, and mine traps. For the most part, ground Magnum, air Magnum, and prone will probably be all you need in full screen fights. Most opponents will realize fairly quickly that they simply cannot challenge Chris full screen like this, and they'll have to try to get in on him.
Yep, caught him teleporting again. I'm not sure if he's...
3/4 screen done confirms.
Alright, so this part of the guide is going to be completely live. So everything you see me doing is going to be live. So yeah, so 3/4 screen confirm. What is a 3/4 screen confirm? It's basically anything, any combos that you can do at around this distance. And what's so special about this distance? Well, it's basically that. That's what's so special about it. It's you're just in range of getting hits off of forward medium and air crouching heavy. So yeah, basically you're using those two attacks to confirm into full combos, and it's probably one of the things that I do pretty well. A lot of Chris players will throw this out or they'll throw that out, and they won't get much off of it. They'll get the damage, maybe a little bit of the chip, but not much else. But the difference between them and my team is that I get full combos off that, and I can get pretty nasty damage too. So, alright, so how do you do it? It's actually really simple. The timings will differ depending on your assist. Again, I have Disruptor, one of the quickest, so I don't have to start it nearly as early as if you would with a slower beam. But the basic gist is you call the assist, dash forward, and then gunshot, or call the assist, jump forward, and then gunshot. And if you time it right, the two will combo. Exactly like that. And then all you do after that is you land on the ground and then Magnum, or just straight up Magnum if you do the ground version. So boom, 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 all three hit, that's a combo. Or boom, 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 that's a combo as well. And all you have to do to confirm off the ground Magnum is, if you're full screen, you just dash forward, OTG, and then do another Magnum. And that right there is a good 460, I believe. Pretty good damage. It, again, depends on the assist you have. But yeah, if you're near the corner, you can do something like this. Get a little bit more damage. Pretty basic combo. But, you know, getting something like that at 3/4 screen, pretty amazing. And obviously you can get some higher damaging options, some prettier looking combos. So yeah, if you have access to a beam assist, definitely want to take advantage of it. It'll be something that'll get you some pretty serious damage and get you kills from pretty far away.
Bread and butter combos.
For the crisp bread and butter section of the guide, I'm going to avoid going too nuts with some of the combos. I'm basically going to show you some of the regular BNBs or the solo BNBs for Chris. If you want to check out some of the crazier ones that use a variety of assists, check out my Chris combo video. So the first combo that I'm going to showcase is going to be the Boulder Punch B&B. It's a pretty old but classic combo. It's simple, easy, reliable, and can be done anywhere from mid-screen and closer. But this one's going to be done in the corner to showcase OTG spacing. So we're going to start off with a crouch medium and then go into standing heavy and then forward heavy and then heavy combination punch, which is the Boulder Punch. We're then going to dash backwards. Now this backwards dash isn't completely necessary, but it helps prevent gunshot whiffing on some of the smaller hitboxes and also prevents Chris from going too deep into the corner. It's basically a good habit to get into. We're then going to go into a crouching heavy OTG and then into a second Boulder Punch and then another dash backwards. Now this backwards dash is a little more important than the first because we're taking the time to space now to make the combo easier later. So we're then going to go into another crouching heavy OTG and then into Magnum and then launch. Now spamming the launch here can help. We're then going to super jump up. Now this is where spacing earlier will help because if Chris is lodged into the corner, he'd be forced to super jump back. But since we spaced early, we instead only have to super jump straight up and then air special, allowing us to air Magnum OTG on the way down and then go straight into flamethrower, no dashing required. Then sweep for a cool 800,000. This second combo is going to be the machine gun relaunch B&B. It's a little more widespread than the first combo. It'll do less damage on its own, but works better with assist since it preserves the ground bounce for use later in the combo. This one's going to be the solo version though. Again, we start with Chris's ground magic series, which is crouching medium, standing heavy, and then forward heavy. But instead of going to Boulder Punch, we're going to go into launcher. We'll then go into super jump forward and then into regular magic series or medium, medium, heavy special. And as Chris is falling to the ground, we'll want to be holding up forward so that when he lands, he'll go into his jump at the first possible frame. We'll immediately want to go into an OTG machine gun, which is quarter circle forward and medium, and then standing heavy the very instant Chris lands on the ground. Then relaunch and again super jump forward, air magic series, medium, medium, heavy, and special. This time, since we're so deep into the corner, we'll want to hold up back so that again, as Chris is falling to the ground, he'll go into his jump at the first possible frame. We'll then go into an air Magnum OTG and then dash forward so he'll be in range to land flamethrower, then sweep. Again, not the best damage, but it'll get a lot better once you work your assists into the mix. This solo version will net you a little over 700,000 damage.
Most of your grabs can be transitioned into the Boulder Punch B&B, but Chris does have two other options for OTG. The Mind Confirm will probably be better in terms of damage, while the Jab Confirm is arguably the easier option, both of which I'll show you how to do right now. First things first, you want to land your grab. In either case, if we try to go straight into our confirms against 0, both options will fail. So to compensate, we'll want to go into a quick ground dash. Against most characters, you won't need to do this, but it's a good habit to get into. Off the ground dash, you'll then want to go into a crouch heavy gunshot. Now, this is the point where the same combo will branch off into two different options. So I'll start with the more common one, the Mind Confirm. Now, this link can be a little bit tricky, so you'll want to be as clean as possible when you input your mind off the OTG gunshot. A good trick that helped me a lot was to do the ground dash into crouch heavy as quickly as possible, then let go of all my directions and buttons, then do the input for the mine. I think a lot of input errors can be attributed to doing this link faster than needed, so try it this way if you're having some trouble. The mine will pop opponents up into the air, giving us plenty of time to catch them with a crouch medium. At this point, the combo will be exactly the same, so I'll go into the other option, the Jab Confirm. And instead of going into the mine off the OTG gunshot, we go into a jab, then a regular ground string, or medium, then heavy. That's it. No real tricky links involved, just ABC. I'm actually shocked a lot more people don't use this option, considering how drop dead easy it is to do. Regardless of which of the two options you choose, the rest of the combo will be exactly the same. So off the stand heavy, you'll go into a forward heavy, then launch, and super jump forward. For this combo, you want to immediately go into a hard knockdown air special, then we'll want to do an air machine gun OTG on the way down. The split second you touch the ground, you'll then want to immediately go into a stand heavy, then launcher. Now the following super jump won't always be straight up as it is here. This will completely depend on how close you are to the corner. If you're deep into the corner, you'll want to super jump back, and if you're far away from the corner, you'll want to super jump forward. Since we're near the corner, we're able to super jump straight up and be at a nice distance to land the OTG Magnum on the way down. We'll then dash forward if needed, then flamethrower and sweep to finish it off.
The last combo that I'm going to showcase is going to be the corner landmine relaunch BNB. This one's a lot newer than the previous two and therefore a lot less common. It's a bit intimidating at first, but it's really grown on me the more I use it. And as you can probably already tell, it's pretty swagtastic and has great damage to boot. This one will want to start near the corner with, you guessed it, Chris's typical ground series, or crouch medium into standing heavy to forward heavy, then boulder punch, or quarter circle backhand heavy. This time we want to be as deep into the corner as possible, so there won't be any need to space your crouching heavy OTG gunshot followed by magnum. Off the wall bounce, we'll be going into launcher, again spamming will help, and then super jump forward, which is very important to the combo. You want to avoid up, and you certainly don't want to super jump back either. This next part is also important. You want to delay your air magic series, or medium heavy, almost as much as possible, to the point where Chris hits the opponent at the very back end tip of his air special, which will cause Chris to land almost at the exact same time as the opponent, allowing him enough time to drop a landmine, which is sure you can motion forward and light, and immediately go into crouch light to manually detonate the landmine. The explosion will actually cancel the crouch light, so Chris is able to go into a second launch, and again, deep into the corner means you'll want to super jump backward, and then air special, so you're able to land the OTG Magnum, and then dash forward to be in range for the flamethrower, then sweep, which will get you a very sexy 825,000 damage without assist.
So that's gonna about do it for my Chris guide, and I'd like to thank everybody who watched, especially if there are any that managed to marathon through all 46 some odd minutes of it. Yeah, you guys are nuts. I'd also like to mention to check out some of the channels and videos that I use for source material. A lot of good people, from players to streamers to commentators and uploaders, spent a lot of time and effort making sure some good content was released to everyone, so be sure to show them some love. But that about does it for me, so as always, I'll catch you guys next time, but until then, peace.
See you next time!